And we're live. So, hello folks, this is now a live hangout between me and a guy who we had some dealings some years back, a guy called Venomfangx. Indeed, he's actually one of the key reasons why I actually started making videos on YouTube in the first place, so maybe I'll just turn it over to Venom to introduce himself. Venom?
Introduced me as some guy. Hi.
Okay, yes, Venomfangx, a creationist from YouTube, one of the most popular creationists on YouTube. And would you like to say anything else about yourself, or?
Oh, I think maybe we should just explain how this conversation came about. A lot of people are probably pretty confused as to why you and I are doing a Google Hangout.
Well, I mean, for me, it's a fairly straightforward thing that, if you like, the water is now so far under the bridge between us that we can sort of sit down, have a beer or two, and reminisce about old times. But I mean, if you want to actually take this to
Introduce myself.
take this forwards in terms of actually discussing some issues, that's great with me.
Oh, sure. Well, really, I had come in unprepared. I just wanted to have a spontaneous conversation with you, and I figured if had I prepared anything, it would have taken away from the spontaneity of it. So.
Well, I likewise have nothing prepared. So, I mean, let me get the ball rolling. The last video that I saw of yours, which I have to admit was, or the last one which I was sort of paying attention, was you'd gone away from home and you're at some sort of Christian school or something, and there was a sort of powwow between you and a bunch of your other Christian friends. And you said that one of the key reasons why you were a creationist was because of the rate of lunar recession. Now, that one for me is a strange one because there is nothing about the rate of lunar recession that would lead you to think that the scientific explanation for the origins of the solar system and the such like is wrong. So, I mean, do you still actually hold by these sorts of...
So now I just heard the last part.
So do you still think that the rate of lunar recession is somehow evidence that the universe is young or not old?
Oh, I heard your question. I'm not sure what that has to do with my last video that I posted, but...
No. I mean, this is going way back. This is... I guess this was the last time I watched your videos on a regular basis.
Oh, I see. Sorry. I was having trouble hearing you at first. Now I understand. I'm willing to renegotiate a lot of what I said regarding videos in the past, so I'm not sure which one you're sourcing, nor do I remember.
I wouldn't be able to tell you, but it was a long time ago. So, I mean, is there any what you would call scientific evidence that you would now say points to a young universe or something, or have you more or less abandoned that? Hello? And it's all gone quiet. This is not going like I expected. Oh, he says he's got disconnected when he was answering the question. So hopefully, you just have to click how to reconnect. The magic of technology. It might not be reliable, but it's a damn sight more reliable than praying. and he says he's working on that. So I guess in the meantime, I will.
I think I'm back.
You're back. Good. I was just
So
about to
you were
start
asking me about
entertaining people by juggling.
you were asking me about
Okay.
lunar recession. Was that the question?
So is there any scientific evidence that you would still stand by and say shows that the universe is young?
I think if we began that conversation anew, which I would
Mm-hmm.
like to do, I would definitely be far more careful in the claims I would make.
Very sensible.
However, that's not exactly what I had wanted to talk about, really, at all.
Okay. Well, what do you want to talk about?
Well, when I was imagining this conversation, I wasn't planning on lunar recession being the first thing we
No, no.
talked
I mean,
about.
this wasn't some sort of whatever. I mean, that's just the last time I watched your videos on a regular basis. That
I
was the
understand. No,
last
that's
thing I
fine. It's
remember.
cool. That's fine. I got
And
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you want to talk about?
Well, really, I just wanted to see how you were doing, say hey, and see what we could talk about. And
Hmm.
so I'm sure there's many things we could discuss.
Yeah. Are you still a young Earth creationist, or
Yes, I am.
why?
I'd want to think about how to answer that before I just blurt something out. You
That's
know,
fine.
do you want me to put that on like the back burner and respond to you later? I'll let it ruminate, and I'll give you as concise an answer I can give you,
Now, I
perhaps at the
mean,
end of this.
usually with these things, there is a fairly strong hierarchy. There's the first reason that you believe this, the second, the third, and so on.
Mhm.
Is there anything like that, or is it something that you would like to ruminate
It
on?
it wouldn't be sufficient just to be like pointing at this and be like, that's why.
Just out of interest, do you read that on a regular basis? The Bible.
Yeah, I would say yes.
Do you not find it one of the most boring books ever?
I find it one of the most exciting books ever.
Okay, the first 1,000 pages. Um,
It does.
it's
Oh, sure. Listen, there's definitely some dry spells of where it ceases to be narrative and becomes just history. And history, for the most part, yeah, is I'm not saying boring. I like certain parts of history, but a lot of it is just the menial, everyday sort of stuff.
and is that well, why do you think if God was writing a book, he would keep all that boring stuff in the middle? I mean, because basically it starts with the beginning of the universe, and there's some interesting stuff there. Man builds towers to get into heaven, which are up in the sky. There's global floods, and then it sort of stops, and then it goes into very, like you were saying, it's very boring history for the next 2/3 of the book, and in fact, probably the next 3/4 of the book. And if I remember rightly, the New Testament's almost none of the Bible, and the actual Gospels are only like 50 pages a shot. I mean, it's a very unevenly written book.
Well, it's not one book.
You know what I mean?
Well, no. I mean, that's an important distinction that needs to be made. The Bible is not one book.
It's a distinction without a difference from where I sit.
But no, no, no. But historically speaking, the Bible was not
Count
written
the
at one time.
books. One. It's one book. Yeah, I mean that's what we call a book. It's one book. I mean, look, okay, you can sort of say it's a compendium or whatever, but is that really a significant difference? Have we lost you again? I sincerely hope this isn't going to be the way it keeps going. Lost the connection again. Well, whilst he's doing that, I'm going to see if I can get back my balls. I'm missing one. I can only find two. There we go. So until he comes back, I'm just going to start juggling because it's actually one of the more difficult things to actually juggle when you're sitting down. When you're standing up, it's actually much easier to work out what the hell's going on. But this is inside 3-ball cascade and outside 3-ball cascade. And there's a load more patterns that you can do, but I'm not. So this is 1 ball. That's actually 1 ball. It's the same ball going over the top again and again. You back with us yet, Sean? No, I'm on my own. Well, I suppose, seeing as we have 1,000 people there, I could ask, does anyone have any questions that when I do actually get Venomfangx back, are there any questions that I should ask him? And seeing as I'm a bit of a noob with this, see if I can find the comments. Such a noob. What the hell's that? Someone tell me where I find the comment. Control room. Oh, that's the effects. That's no good. Chat screen. Oh, I could share my screen and show you all sorts of interesting things, like what I've been working on, which is why sodium explodes. And the answer is, it's really interesting. Like, every time I look at this, there is something else weird happening. And it almost always involves the color blue. It's got more blue lights than whatever one of those modern films. Or there are blue LEDs everywhere in movies these days. At this rate, I might just start taking questions myself. I think his connection is no. Come to this. He's on Skype. He's not responding to me. This is the real bitch, is if let's try control room. No, I don't want that. I'm really sorry about this, people. Yeah, I had expected it to go more smoothly. I wonder. I get DPR in here. He's still around. No, he's probably not online. Oh, guess he's just turned up back on Skype. So I assume that Venomfangx will be back shortly. And he beeps me. Okay. He says he lost the internet. Apparently God is not smiling on our young Christian at the moment. But let's hope that things improve. And in the meantime, I'm going to try and work out if I can actually get some comments here. Q&A. Downloading app. Hey.
Testing.
Yep. Okay, you're back in. Keep talking. Whilst so where were we? We just got up to Bible, one book or many books. Do you really care? And if so, why?
Yes. Yes, that's what we were talking about. And I was saying that's an important distinction to make.
Why?
Because not every book is meant to be part of the... There is a narrative to the whole of the Bible, so like an overarching story, but that story gets interrupted for long stretches of history.
I mean, this just doesn't sound like a book written by God to me. I mean, if you can create the universe in 7 days, you can write a coherent book.
Well, hold on, stop. Maybe that was a joke on your part, in which case I appreciate your sense of humor. You said that it doesn't sound like the way God would do it to you, but I assume, Thunderfoot, you don't think that you're God, or know how God would do things if you were God.
I just think that if someone can actually create the universe, which you would call a sophisticated task, that they can write a coherent book, which is a relatively trivial task.
I believe the Bible's coherency is extremely sophisticated. I could give you one
This is the
example.
sort of sophistication you get out of Mad Men.
Well, let me prove my point then. Challenge me on that.
The challenge on one.
That the Bible doesn't have a coherent narrative that begins in Genesis and ends in Revelation.
Oh, you
And
said there's large periods in the middle that are basically a dry spell. Nothing happens. There's like 1,000 pages where it's just, there was this king and that king and whatever.
right. Well, isn't that true of your own life too? That there are moments of extreme importance, and then a lot of it is just the same everyday, normal
But
stuff.
my life isn't meant to be a manual written by God that's meant to impart divine wisdom to people in ages to come.
Well, I think one of the cool things about the Bible's tedium with everyday details is it tells me that God is interested in my everyday, normal stuff. I think that's important.
Really? Um,
Definitely.
you think of all the things that God has to pay attention to, you're high on his list of priorities, that he would
It's not about
rather
no no no
achieve.
no no. You misunderstand me. It's not about priorities. It's a matter of fact that he is aware of everything at all times. And so it's not a matter of priority. It's just all of it is known to him in
So he
every
just
detail.
watches people die of leukemia with indifference.
Indifference? I think that's simply not the case. I don't think God is indifferent at all.
So he just watches. Well, I mean, you said that he just watches all of this. I mean, this is the sort of
No,
ultimate
no, 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 no,
voyeur.
no. I didn't say he merely just watches. It's just omniscience necessitates that you're aware of everything. It's just like it's an attribute of being omniscient.
Okay. So it is sort of the ultimate big brother that he knows not only what everyone's going to do, but he watches it every second of the time.
Well, there's no time for God. God created time.
Okay, so for him, the universe is a static construct.
No.
Yes, if he's watching everything, then it's a static construct to him.
Okay, maybe I need the definition of a static construct.
That there is
Go ahead.
nothing that changes about the universe for God. He knows how everything will happen. The universe is 100% deterministic in this um, view of things. There is no free will. He knows what everyone is going to do. The universe is already played out, and he
Okay,
sees
I see what you're
everything
saying.
that's going to happen.
I see exactly what you're saying. And I guess where I would perhaps question that view is that you need to also make room for the intersection of uh, causal agents in this scenario or reality or whatever you want to call the temporal universe that make decisions, free will decisions that are not caused directly from God himself, like you and me.
But God does know what your decision will be. He must do it. If he sees the entirety of time, then he must know what's going to happen.
So
There
you're
is
saying
no
God's
future. So
knowledge,
if there is no time, then the universe is a static, unchanging construct for him.
there's no time to God. Within God's nature is not contained within time, but there is time in the universe. No question about that.
But that's not what we're talking about. You say that there is no such thing as time for God because he knows what's going to happen in every piece of time.
No, 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 no. I'm saying God himself, within his nature, it does not consist of time, but God has a unique relationship with time I would never deny that. God created time.
Uh,
You said something fascinating to me. You
let's
said
go back to
God's knowledge. God knows what I will do before I do it, therefore I don't have free will. You said something like that. Does that sound familiar?
well, if God knows what you're going to do, then yes, there was no other choice that you could have made.
Okay, so what I would say to that is God's knowledge, but it doesn't cause it.
Yes, but the fact that it was 100% predictable means that you never had any free will in the first place.
Predict what I would do, because prediction assumes certain constructs that only apply to beings in time. To predict the future, the future needs to not be present. You need to be predicting it from a
I mean,
vantage
I
point
can predict
of
where a
time.
ball. No, you can predict if I throw a ball, I can predict where it will be at a future value of t.
And I'm saying God does not merely predict, because that would be assuming God didn't know something.
Okay, yeah. So for God, the universe is there is nothing new that's going to happen in the universe. It's a static construct. It's like a fixed, unchanging object. That's how God sees the universe. All right.
Does the let me ask you this, and then maybe I'd agree with you. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. Would the incarnation, I mean, if we talk about Jesus and him being God who entered into time, does that change this discussion at all?
Well, no. I mean, if you know everything that was going to happen, everything that's going to happen, then the universe is an object. It's there is nothing that actually changes in it. Once you actually know all of the parameter space, you know the dimensions, you know the time, you know where every object's going to be. The universe is just a point of data. Pretty dull,
Some
really.
people would say, well, some people would say from quantum mechanics and whatnot that, yeah, everything is information, that is the basis of, data is the basis of everything. So I don't know, maybe there is some truth to what you're saying.
Yeah. So, but I mean, this is the thing. If you know what's going to happen, then you can say you have free will all that you want, but there's only one decision you can ever make. That's not really free
In
will.
accordance with, right, in accordance with what the mind, which knows what you will do, knows you will do.
So in other words, if someone is born, God knows exactly where he will be, all the mistakes that they will make, and how they will end up. Now, did that person have any choice in that if it was completely determined? Because if you know what's going to happen, then the universe is deterministic.
Again,
Because
I'm not sure
it's a solid fixed object, right? This is what you get if you say that God knows everything. That it's an unchanging object. Point A must go to point B. There is no other place it can end up at.
The question is, how did it end up at B? What was the mechanism? And you're saying that God was the cause of every event in
not the
time.
cause. What I'm saying is, if you know what the outcome will be,
Yeah.
then there was never any option for it to go any other way.
I think we're confusing epistemology with ontology. Epistemology is the study of how does God know something is different than the ontology or the nature of being, which is what does it mean to be in time, and how does God's knowledge correlate to that? And questions. You're asking, how does God know?
No.
Or at least we should be asking that.
No.
How does God know everything?
The thing is that if God actually if for God the universe is a static construct, then that now actually becomes the nature of the universe. Basically, the nature of the universe becomes deterministic. Now, after that, it doesn't really matter what you do or anything, because there is it's a static object. You're at point A, you will end up at point B.
But
Now
the
you
question is, how
can,
do you end up at point B? What is the mechanism that brings
but
you
there
to
is
that?
no way you can choose to end up anywhere else. If you have no choice, do you actually have the free will?
Maybe we just need to redefine what free will means, because there are certain things I can't choose,
Hmm.
which I know I can't choose, but that doesn't mean I don't have free will. It just depends on your definition of free will, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. I'll So you want to hear my sort of take on this? Because I'm sure I've heard you say before that for atheists, if you believe that the universe is deterministic, then everything that you do is futile because it was predestined to be this way. But I mean, yeah, ultimately, the question of whether the universe is deterministic or not doesn't actually. I mean, you said yourself that you think that the universe is deterministic, but this doesn't sort of rob you of any purpose of being.
I
Now,
just think we're using deterministic to mean different things. Like, I think there are certain laws of physics that, we can run physics simulations and always have the same outcome at the end because physics, if there is no change in the physics, certain interactions will take place the same way every time. At least that's my understanding of physics, right?
it depends what sort of levels that you're talking about, but if you're
Well, let's
sort of
talk about it on a
talking,
level where it's fairly predictable.
yeah, I throw a ball in a in a whatever zero gravity, whatever it moves according to Newtonian motion, it's
Right,
always going to do the same thing.
right.
All right, but basically, what you're talking about there is uh, physics is actually a branch of science, and science is basically in the business of mimicking reality. And the reason you want to mimic reality is because you care about what happens in the future. Because if you know what's going to happen in the future, then this gives you versatility to do things. So it allows you to grow your crops and survive the winter, and find out where the water holes are in dry seasons and such like. Or, at a greater level, it allows you to build your gaming consoles and whatever. So what the whole science is basically the endeavor of building models that mimic reality,
Certainly, I agree with
because
that.
predictivity is everything, right? If your
Okay.
science isn't predicting something of use, then you can't really tell whether it's modeling reality, and it's certainly not going to help you predict things in the future. Now, there is limits to how well this works, and it basically boils down to what is the smallest unit of modelable information in the universe. And at the moment, we'd say it's something around the level of a quantum. Basically, there is nothing small that you can get from this. And this means that the most effective way that you can model the smallest part of the universe is with that part itself. And what comes out of this is if you want to build a 100% predictive model of the universe, then you need a model the size of the universe, which you obviously can't do. So even if the universe was 100% predictable from the base level up, it doesn't actually help you because without a model the size of the universe, you can't actually predict what's going to happen with 100% certainty.
Okay.
And there's a second thing to this, which is, well, um, there are many millions, whatever, 10 to the 30 particles in the Earth or something, or 10 to the 30 kilos, and another, I don't know, 20 orders of magnitude to get the number of particles in the Earth. I don't need to know every quantum state of each of those 10 to the 50 nuclei or whatever to actually work out what gravity is. It's a single number, right? So you get these huge economies when you're dealing with macroscopic predictions. And that's basically what enables us to function. That's what allows us to develop these sort of quasi-predictive models of reality. Um, so the bottom line here is even if the universe is deterministic, you can't tell. And even if it was, you wouldn't be able to construct a model good enough to actually help you. So they're basically unanswerable questions from where I sit. And there
Right,
are
but
plenty of problems that you can solve, and those are the ones that I focus on.
okay, but what does that have to do with what we were talking about?
Deterministic universe. Is the universe deterministic? And if it is 100% deterministic, does that rob you of the purpose of life?
Well, here's the thing. I don't believe in just the temporal, material universe. I believe in things that you don't, like the existence of the soul, which I don't think is bound by the laws of physics that we know.
So let's just see, because there was another guy, you might know him, no, what's he called? Once Forgiven, Now Free. There we go. He came up with some reasonings along these lines, the existence of the soul.
Okay.
So where do you think the borders between biochemistry and the soul are? So, for instance, when I move my fingers, this is all there is just biochemistry involved here. Yes.
Sure.
So, and the brain is making the decisions to actually wiggle the fingers. Yes.
Not necessarily.
So, is the brain something that interfaces with the soul? Is that
I believe that would probably be, yeah, that might be the case.
right? So the fundamental problem here is it doesn't really matter whether you're dealing. There must be some net interaction between the soul and the brain, and if there was, that would be measurable. And there is nothing measurable there, right?
How
There
would it be
is
measurable?
thermodynamics.
But hold
The
on, the
basic,
soul would not be part of the thermal dynamic world.
yes, but it's interfacing with it. If it's actually interacting with the brain,
Hmm.
then it's causing neurons to fire. Yes?
No,
No.
not
Then
necessarily, no.
how is it interfacing with the brain? Um,
You're asking for what is the, yeah, you're asking for what is the measurable effect that the soul is causing in the brain.
yeah. I mean, we put people in MRI scanners. We can see the brain functioning. There
Sure.
is, um, you can see that neurons firing is all there is.
Well, the only reason we can only see that is because, I mean, we are in the physical. All we can see is the physical.
Yeah,
Why would you expect to see something that was not physical in the physical world?
because it's interfacing with something that's physical. It is the brain. I mean, we know that. Here would be another example. Do you perceive the brain as essentially some sort of antenna for communicating with the soul? Because this is the thing: when people suffer partial brain damage, they lose certain elements of their ability to reason, perceive faces, time, all sorts of things,
Right.
right? Uh, is that just because their brain is not communicating with their soul, or what do you think's going
Or
on there?
vice versa, yeah. I don't know what abilities the brain has that the soul does not. So, like the ability to do mathematics or to recall a memory, because we know memory is stored in the brain. Can a soul without a brain recall its memories? It's possible that the answer is no.
So, I mean, what exactly do you perceive the soul as? I mean, if someone gets like really bad brain damage,
Right.
what happens to their soul?
Well, the soul cannot be
I mean,
damaged as the brain can.
well, seeing as you've got no way of knowing, how do you know that?
I guess it would be a scary thought to think that the soul could be damaged. Hmm. What I do know is, at least according to the testimony of Scripture, the body dies, but the soul endures. That's obviously a very universal belief for all Christians.
But it's also a very universal belief for all humans is they don't want to die.
I would never
I
object
mean,
to the fact that we all die. That is certainly true.
but no one wants to die. People want to keep living. It's a sort of it's biologically inbuilt. Yeah.
Yes, I would certainly agree with that. I don't want to die either.
So isn't the obvious explanation here that these are just stories told to make them people feel better about their inevitable death?
That seems like a very large assumption to me, not justified by at least this conversation.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, one of the first things religions, not just Christianity, all religions come up with is an afterlife, right? People don't like the idea that they're going to cease to be.
I agree.
And, sorry?
I agree with you, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, let me ask you the question, because just take this on my say-so for the moment, but you've been dead for 13 billion years already. Did it bother you?
I was dead, like me personally?
Well, you weren't alive, let me put it that way.
But you said I, or you, so you're referring to a person.
Either you or me, all right? The universe has been around for 13.5 billion years. I've only been conscious for the last 40 years or so. Now, that means that for the incredibly large part of the universe, I wasn't alive, and it didn't particularly bother me. Now, if you think that do you think that your soul has been here for the entire length of the universe?
No, I believe I was created about 28 years ago.
So souls are only created when they have physical bodies to be attached to. Is that what you think?
There does seem to be a correlation, yes.
So when do souls get created? I mean, if the interface is basically the brain, then you need the brain before you can have a soul, because it's got no way to communicate with the body.
There may be some truth to that.
So where are these souls coming from?
I would say that there is almost two worlds superimposed upon each other, and so we have the physical world interacting or interfacing, to use your word, with another world. And I think that just as we, through conception, we give our nature to our children, in the spiritual world there may be a sense in which we also give, I wouldn't say part of our soul to our children, but there may be some mechanism by which we, by conception, pass to them what we have in our own nature. How that exactly works, I don't know. But the Bible does say that God knits us together in the womb. That may be a reference to the soul. There is a verse where it says God creates the soul of man in the womb. So I can pull up that verse just so I don't misquote it or paraphrase it. Okay.
Yeah, so where does your soul go when you sleep? Why do you have to sleep?
We sleep, I think, what is it, because the brain gets heated and needs to cool down?
It's got multiple functions.
Sure.
But none of them actually involve souls.
Listen, the reason I go to the bathroom is purely physical. I wouldn't claim that there's a soulish reason for that.
Yeah, I mean that's another peculiar thing. You know, if man was created in the image of God,
sure.
Why do you need to go to the bathroom?
Well, we were made in the image of God, and the Bible says Jesus is the image of God. And so once you make that distinction, it says that we are actually made in Him. And that has theological implications, which we may talk about, or maybe you're not concerned.
So, I mean, well, where I'm going with this is God a bipedal ape?
No, certainly not. Notice He made man and woman in His image, so neither the male physical body or the female physical body necessarily represents God, because obviously God is not a physical being as we are.
So, yeah, you think this is metaphorical, that we're not actually physically created in the image of God?
Well, no, I think the image of God is, in a lot of sense, spiritual. So, love, for example. Love is a uniquely human, you may argue that
But it's
it
also a
appears to be.
property that a single entity cannot possess. If you're the
Love?
only entity in the universe, you can't love anything with the possible exception of yourself.
Well, that's why God's a Trinity.
That's getting distinctly weird. If you're actually three people in the universe,
No, no, no.
do you
God's
love
not in the
each other?
universe.
I mean,
God's not in the universe, first of all. And second of all, God is. Let me try and put this differently. The Bible talks about God as Father and Son.
again, I mean, well, why would you have children if you're a god? I mean, if I mean, did they always exist like this? There was all, that right from the very beginning they were father and son.
Always, in eternity, yes.
Why, if you're the omnipotent being, why would you
Well,
have
the Son
children?
is also the omnipotent. They share the same being. So they are one in nature and being.
So they're the same thing.
In
What are
nature,
the
yes.
what is the? Yeah, I mean, you say that there are three gods here.
No.
What are the properties that actually distinguish these three components? I mean, is it like saying that I'm three people because sometimes I eat and sometimes I talk?
No. They are as distinct as persons as you and I are distinct as persons.
So it's three personalities.
No. They're identical in respect, in regard to personhood and character and holiness and all the things that make God God, the Father, Son, and Spirit all share in common.
Then they're identical.
Yes. Jesus said, I and the Father are one. Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father.
So there are three identical gods.
The Bible would say God is one. And then the question is, one what?
Yeah, I mean, this is where you're getting around the problems. If there are three identical gods, that's fine, but those are three
I
separate
wouldn't say three
identical
identical
gods.
gods. I would say three identical persons who each and all are, in nature, God.
Right, so they all have exactly the same personality, exactly the same knowledge. So they're three identical
Certainly the
gods. That's
same
the
knowledge, yes.
definition. So if you've got three identical gods, they're three separate gods. They're not the same. And if there are three identical gods that are exactly the same and they're one, then you've got one god. You can't have three being one.
Listen, I mean, you're a scientist. I'm sure you're aware that some things do have unique properties and attributes, and the very fact that we say that they are the same in some sense, there is a perhaps not like anything, but there are certain things that we can draw
Mm,
commonalities from, like the relationship between fathers and sons. For example, I have my father's nature. I am identical to him, human. We are both equally and fully human. I'm sure you would agree with that.
yes, but you're two separate people.
Agreed, fully. And
Yeah.
that's the same, it's the same with God. If we use the word God like we use any word describing a nature, like the word man or fish or horse,
I mean, the nearest you're going to get here is clones. There are three clones.
no. And the reason we wouldn't say they're clones is because of, I wouldn't say how the son was, it's the word that's used, it's the word begotten.
Okay, actually, hang on. I've got a further question. If they're three
Sure.
identical, if they're three and they're identical, how do you
Mhm.
tell them apart?
That's a great question. Because each member does and performs different responsibilities in relationship to how man relates to God.
So they're not identical. Or they're identical, but they have different duties. Is that the?
They operate distinctly for the purpose of allowing us to differentiate.
No, okay. So they have different job descriptions. Is that the?
Yeah, I mean, the Bible says the Father sent the Son into the world, and now the Son sends the Spirit into the world. So they're doing different things at different times.
So how do they decide which one was going to be the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost
That
if
wasn't
they're all
decided.
identical?
No, that
Right?
wasn't decided. That has to do with the nature of what they are and how they relate to each other within the nature of God eternally. So
Right.
that was never determined, as if it wasn't the case before.
Let me take a different line because this is one of the ones which it comes across when you actually read the Gospels and when you actually take a look around in the wide world and you see other people who have claimed to be the Son of God of one form or another.
Okay.
Is if Jesus came back, would you actually know him? And let me put the additional caveat on this before you answer that the apostles hung around with Jesus for years, and in some cases they weren't even sure it was him until he got crucified. In some cases, they weren't really sure until they actually poked their fingers in his holes that he was God. Although, to be honest, if that's the thing that's going to swing you from believing to not believing, um, yeah, I'd have thought there would have been better things to work out if someone really is the supreme being than that. So, I mean, if Jesus was to come back, would you actually know?
Yes, he said everyone will know.
It says everyone will know, but I mean, if people could have, in the Bible, it also says that people hung around with Jesus, the Son of God, for years and didn't sort of think, oh, yeah, that's the Son of God.
Well, no. When he comes back, I mean, it tells us what it's going to look like when he comes back, and he said, don't believe it if it doesn't look exactly like this. So he has to meet very specific criteria when he returns, otherwise I won't believe it.
Yeah. But don't you think that it's weird that these people could have actually hung around with the most divine being in the universe
And not
for
know it.
years and not thought this might be the Son of God or something like that?
Well, some did, obviously,
Uh,
at a certain
no,
point.
no, I mean, even of the disciples, most of them weren't sure until he comes back from the dead. And to be honest, if you've actually watched people resurrect people, you know, this might be a bit of a clue or something. But uh, I mean, isn't the most obvious explanation here that you know you take a look around at other people who have claimed to be the Son of God or some sort of divine
Before or
being?
after Jesus?
Sorry.
Before or after
Oh,
Jesus?
after. I mean, so if you go to places like India, they have these prophets who claim to have healed thousands of people, brought people back from the dead, and they got millions of followers. And you know, what does that sound like the sort of thing that Jesus did?
Well, there's a reason we believe in Jesus and not those other ones.
Which is,
Well, Jesus had to fulfill certain criteria that were foretold of the Messiah in the Old Testament. And so we were looking for a very specific person to come at a very specific time in history. And only
yeah.
Jesus fulfills that criteria.
So you don't think maybe the more obvious explanation here is the people who wrote the Bible wrote it that way?
Wrote it
You've
which
got to
way?
have a lot of faith that these things genuinely were prophecies. I mean, why even bother with all this palaver about prophecies? I mean, isn't it going to be self-evident if you're the son of God, or if you're actually God and you're going to come to visit the universe that you created?
Mhm.
Why bother with the prophecies? I mean,
It's so that we could
what's
identify him. Let me give you one example, because we were talking about this earlier in the conversation.
so?
Okay, let me use a random example. So they're called the Abrahamic faiths. I'm sure
Yeah,
you're familiar with the word. Abraham was a prophet.
yeah.
Abraham, the most famous thing he ever did, the reason the faith is named after him, is because of his whole The thing going on with Isaac, God told him to sacrifice his son. You're familiar with the story?
More than a little, yeah.
Okay, so Genesis 22, God tells Abraham, sacrifice your son, and this is what Abraham's famous for. Like, this is the most, when you think Abraham, that's at least what I think of, is that story.
But I mean, isn't that just the most sick test of faith ever?
It is if you don't understand it, yeah.
No, it's just the most sick test of faith ever. I mean, to tell someone to kill their son as an act of loyalty is just messed up beyond all recognition.
Let me explain why I think he was asked to do this, and then see if maybe your view on that might change.
Sure.
Abraham was a prophet, like I said, so I don't remember how we were talking about it earlier in the conversation, but I was explaining how the Bible has a coherent narrative that begins in Genesis and ends in Revelation.
Okay.
Right. So this moment with Abraham was one of the defining moments of that narrative. Without having to go through everything in Genesis up until this point, all throughout the Bible, from the time Adam and Eve sinned, God made a promise to them about a child that would be born. That's Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. And so here we have a prophecy being made that's going to tell us something about this narrative, this really important child that's going to be born. So a father, Abraham, is told to sacrifice his son. And this is prophetic, meaning it shows what God's going to do in the future. It has something to do with this promise that was made. You're totally not getting what I'm saying.
No, I mean, if this is the best way that you can communicate, you've got communication problems. And if you've got communication problems, you're not the most supreme being in the universe who is absolutely divine and can do everything.
Okay, well, hold on. What am I trying to communicate? At least, why am I talking about Abraham?
I mean, for me, Abraham is a guy who clearly had psychological issues, and thankfully didn't get around to killing his son.
Well, God stopped him, so clearly God didn't want that to happen. That is part of the story.
He asked him to do it in the first place.
Well, that's what I'm trying to explain to you.
Okay,
I think God was showing us that one day this is what God would do, that he would sacrifice his son.
But he didn't sacrifice his son. He asked him to sacrifice his son, then didn't do it.
Well, Abraham, certainly, because Isaac is not...
So how is this a metaphor for anything else that happens? First of all, who is going to be the guy saying, sacrifice your son as a test of faith, and then stopping him from doing it? I mean, I just don't see this cropping up anywhere else.
Well, it doesn't crop up anywhere else. You're right. But right after, you said you're familiar with the story, so I assume you've read it. Right as God stops Abraham from doing the offering, Abraham then makes a prophecy about what this event meant. I could bring it up, or I can just paraphrase it, whatever you'd prefer.
Paraphrasing, fine.
He says that on this mountain, Mount Moriah, which is where he was asked to do it, it would be seen. And the it here being a reference to the offering, or the lamb, or the promise. Jesus was sacrificed on that same spot.
What? So this God's got a soft spot for locations? I mean, is that...
It's not... Abraham is showing us, you and me today, that one day God would do this, that he would sacrifice his son. And so
But Abraham didn't sacrifice his son.
Isn't that a good thing? Aren't you glad?
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, a guy not sacrificing his son is not a good metaphor for someone saying, but I'm going to kill my son here later.
No, you need to understand. Abraham was willing to be obedient to God. Now, there's other considerations here, because Isaac was like the child of promise, and God said that a nation would come through him. And so Abraham, if you sacrifice your son, he's not alive, then he can't fulfill the promises. So there's a lot of considerations in depth to the story, which we can just gloss over, because you're probably not interested.
I mean, isn't the most important bit here is it is probably one of the most strongly biologically hardwired things that you can get is
Which
not
is?
to harm your children. Right? Beyond that, you've probably only got self-preservation. Right? These are,
So
I
that
mean,
shows
it's
that
just
should tell
so
you.
ingrained that you should
Yeah.
look
So that should
after
tell
your
you
children.
how hard it was, how painful it was, not just for Abraham to think that he was going to go through with this, but how painful it was for God to go through with it as well.
Yeah, but I mean, first of all, doesn't that make God just one of the most sick people ever to
How?
ask someone to kill their son as an act of faith?
Well, remember, God knows the future, so he knows that it's not going to happen. He stopped it.
But he
Right.
asked, right? Abraham didn't know, and I mean, this is just
Here's what
it's
Abraham did know.
grotesque.
Abraham knew, well, here's the thing. Abraham knew certain things about God. That's the only reason Abraham was willing to go through with this, is he knew that God kept his promises. And it comments later in the New Testament that Abraham reasoned that Isaac would be raised from the dead if necessary, because God had promised a nation would come from Isaac. And Abraham knew that God would fulfill his promise.
Don't you
And
think that a far more plausible explanation for all of this is that the guy was crazy, like most people who are crazy who would kill their children? No
no,
sane
because I think this
person,
story is about Jesus Christ.
no sane person would be willing to kill their kid. So is that
Again,
not?
you need to understand who Abraham was and what this story is about. And if you do not allow it to mean what it's supposed to mean, then yeah, I'd agree with you. I'd agree that it's a meaningless story about a savage man attempting to kill his son. But that's just not what the story is.
Yeah.
It's
So just
it's
out of
it's
interest,
not.
do you think that children who are killed do go to heaven? I mean, William Lane Craig, I've seen this thing which is
Yeah.
where he goes off and says that, all these children that were ordered to be slaughtered by the army of God in the Bible, that was actually a blessing for them. They were receiving the best blessing that they could get by being slaughtered by these soldiers.
I wouldn't phrase it quite like that. Do I think children go to heaven? Yeah, there does seem to be evidence of that.
So why would you actually try and keep your children alive? If they die, they go straight to heaven. I mean, why would you risk
That's pretty
risk
grotesque.
anything else happening?
Because I wouldn't. I mean, for the same reason that you find the Abraham killing his son to be so difficult even to think about. I mean, that's just not an option.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so the children who were ordered to be killed by the armies of God in the Bible, and often at actual God's command,
Yeah.
was that a good thing or a bad thing?
For the purposes of God, it seemed to be necessary.
So that's the best solution that the Supreme Being could come up with, was to actually have them put to death at the edge of a sword. There
I'm
weren't
not in a
other options,
position.
like, say, transporting them to another happy planet or something, or even just another part of the globe. Why actually have them killed?
Well, I mean, transport here. You're obviously asking for a miracle.
Well, to be unfair, if you can actually create the universe, moving someone from one part of the Earth to another
Shouldn't be
is
too difficult. No, actually, it happened in the Book of Acts. So, yeah, God certainly is capable of doing that.
what does God do in the Book of Acts?
There was a character. I think I'll have to pull it up. What was his name? Anyways, he was reading scriptures, and he happened to realize he had been moved.
Yeah.
I'll look for
I,
it in a
I've
while.
woken up in strange places as well, but I didn't put it down to a miracle.
But you weren't reading the scriptures while doing it, were you?
No, but
Yeah.
there are little blank spells in between. I might have been. Possible.
Well, you were a teenager in the '60s, right? So
Uh, no, no, I wasn't
no.
even born in the 60s.
Oh, excuse me.
I'm not that old.
Sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, coming back to yeah, if you're the supreme being of the universe,
I'm not, and so it makes it
I
very
know,
difficult
but
for me.
if you were, there are
I can't
far.
entertain those hypotheticals. I find that difficult because
I find it trivial. If I can come out with better solutions with all of my
yeah.
shortcomings, right? Just off the top of my, yeah, without any special abilities, and God can't do that, then that's not an omnipotent God.
Again, I think there are certain things that happen in this world that are consequences and judgments, and some of them are pretty terrifying.
Well, I mean, let's take an obvious one: childhood cancer. What purpose does children getting cancer serve?
Well, in your mind, do you think that God's actively giving cancer to children? Is that your view?
No, but I mean, you said earlier that you think he just watches them die with indifference.
I didn't say that. You said that, and I said no, not with indifference.
Okay, well, he watches them and doesn't do anything. That's
He
pretty
doesn't stop it.
indifferent.
He doesn't stop it from happening, but I think there could be a reason why.
There are why God moves in mysterious ways.
No, I mean I could give you a. It would probably take me a few minutes to explain at least the whole scheme of it, but maybe I could try to abbreviate. We'd have to go back to the beginning. Like we'd have to explain why God made everything and what God is trying to, not what he's trying to accomplish, what he will accomplish, and what the end will look like, and where all of that suffering in the middle, what becomes of it? Like what does it mean?
Well, I mean, for him, there is no change here anywhere. What you were describing earlier is, for God, the universe is a static object. He already knows who's going to be saved, who's not. There is nothing interesting in the universe. Nothing. It's all happened
Interesting to who?
to God. I mean, look, if you know everything there is to know about an object,
Yeah.
why do you have any interest in it now whatsoever? There is nothing
What if that
interesting.
object is a person?
Sorry?
What if that object is a person and not an object?
No, people are objects.
People are objects?
Yes.
You don't assign any more value to people than to other objects like the Bible? Does the person have more value than a...
No, no. I mean, I think we're having a bit of an issue about what object means.
Okay,
Right?
so yeah, let's talk about what does object
All
mean?
objects don't have the same value. So a bar of gold and a bar of lead are both objects. Doesn't mean they're worth the same. In the same way,
Wait,
we're
worth to who? Because objectively speaking, we would say that they don't actually I mean, they're only valued if they're valued, right?
yeah, right. So I mean, with this, you're actually sort of talking about the ensemble values of mankind.
Do you agree that man has such values?
That man has ensemble things that they assign value to, yes.
And so the best we can hope for is to assign value to ourselves.
Uh, no.
No.
Most people have an individual interest in their own well-being.
Okay.
Um, but I mean, this is obviously going towards objective morality. Um,
No, that hadn't even crossed my mind, but sure, we could talk about that.
okay, so let me ask you a leading question into this.
Sure.
Is there such a thing as objective? If I'm 6'1", am I an objectively tall human?
You are objectively the height that you are.
So yeah, I mean, if you can't tell me whether I'm tall or short,
Compared to
um,
it, I mean, I'd have to compare you to every other person, I guess.
very good, very good. So height is a relative concept. In fact, it's always relative. Height relative to a meter. It's so many times a unit relative to a unit. You know?
Okay, yeah.
So with morality, it is relative to mankind, right? It is defined that there is going to be an array of what people think is acceptable and not acceptable, and there will be an average in there somewhere.
And you think that average determines what?
Well, that's de facto what it is. This is how we define whether people are tall or short. It's also how we define whether people behave morally or not.
That is how we determine that. I'm not sure that that is the only determination that's being made.
Well, that's the morality that we actually have in society.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I'm just saying that perhaps there is yet another party who has his own system of judgment, which may not be our own.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is virtually everything that people intuitively feel as moral.
You would agree that men have such intuitions, that we intuitively are aware of right and wrong?
Oh, certainly. I mean, well, for certain things, absolutely yes. For instance, looking after your children.
Not all
There is no
people seem to
commandment in the
respond
Bible
very
that
well
says,
to that.
sorry?
And not all people seem to respond well to that intuition. Some people do it very poorly.
Right, but almost everyone. I mean, you get that in the animal kingdom as well, that there are bad parents, but
Yeah,
their genes don't go on very far, you know?
hopefully.
Those things get weeded out pretty quickly. You know, it's almost de facto, if you don't take care of your children aren't going to thrive, especially
Got it.
not if you're a human.
Sure.
Um, so, um, with certain things, there is a very strong biological hardwire. Looking after your kids, you know, in terms of social interactions, things that you do in a group. Looking after your kids is the first one. Um, Loyalty to colleagues is another, um, and so on. So things that basically put self-sacrifice for the benefit of the group are usually seen as virtuous, even though there's nothing like this in the Bible. There is no commandment that says thou shalt look after your children, right? But why do you
Wrong,
need?
actually.
There is. Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah, if you spare disciplining a child, yeah, you could potentially have a child on your hands who never learns right from wrong. That would not be a good thing.
Yes, but rod implies beating. There are other ways
No.
of getting
Okay,
through to
hold on.
children other than
That's not
beating
exactly
them.
fair. Come now. You're talking about the Proverbs. I mean, if you want to talk Proverbs with me, I can name you all kinds of Proverbs where it talks about what a good father and a good mother does and how they raise up a child in the way
Yeah, I mean,
it should go and
the
love their
proverbs
children
are an
and
interesting.
provide an inheritance. Go ahead.
I mean, the proverbs are all over the place. They're just basically a bunch of sayings. I mean, if you just go through quotes on Wikipedia, you will
You
find
were the one who
just as
quoted
much
a proverb
wisdom.
first. But hold on,
I,
you
I, I know, I know.
spare the rod. You were the one who
But
brought up Proverbs.
so let's go back to the Ten Commandments. The only one of the
Sure.
Ten Commandments that is relates to this is respect thy mother and father. It says nothing about being a good parent.
Well, firstly, who received the Ten Commandments?
A guy who took 40 years to get from Egypt to Israel.
Right, okay, so Moses gave the law to Israel. I would argue that we today are not the recipients of the Ten Commandments.
So I mean, it always struck me as weird, though. I mean, just taking it as what was given to um, uh, whatever. Yeah, Abraham. Abraham? No, Moses. Moses. I mean,
Okay.
sorry, confused there for a moment. Why did he need to be told not to kill each other, but didn't need to be told to look after his kids?
You're talking about Moses.
Yeah.
Well, Moses received more than the Ten Commandments. In fact, Okay, actually, thank you for bringing this up. So you want to talk about Moses. God was actually going to
Okay, you've frozen there.
into his to Israel. So God said, if you don't, oh,
You're back. You're back.
sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine. Keep going.
Early on in the story, sure, early on in the story of Moses, God told him to circumcise his son, for neglecting his duties to his family before he attempted to go and free Israel from slavery. So to say that his child was neglected,
Actually, well, to be honest, why does chopping a bit off the end of your
go ahead.
penis actually? Why does God care about that?
It's circumcision is a
So
symbol.
you were saying
It's
that he
symbolic.
didn't.
We are definitely having connection problems.
Yeah. Um, it seems to be okay at the moment. But how is chopping off part of your penis?
Yes,
Why does that make God feel good or bad or indifferent?
it's a symbol, and it has a very specific meaning.
That's the best thing that you could come up with that God thinks, yeah, I want a sign of obedience. Chop the end off your penis.
Of your, I mean, it's really just loose skin, so you're not actually losing function or anything of particular importance.
That is certainly medically questionable. Not
Some
the
people
nerve
could argue for
endings,
the medical benefits of circumcision, because
yeah, and others would argue against it.
okay,
If only for one of the key reasons that you are basically choosing to chop parts off a healthy child, which is questionable.
I would say that the part you're saying that you're chopping off is not. It's not like chopping off an arm or an ear or
Yeah,
even part of a finger.
it's far more functional than that. But I mean, what about chopping off your little
Hold on,
toe?
function? You mean the foreskin? You're saying it has a particularly important function?
Well, it was there for a reason, presumably. I
Okay.
mean, did God actually? This is an interesting question. Did God deliberately leave the foreskin on man so he could ask them to chop it off later as a test of faith?
Not as a test of faith. I could posit
Okay, it's
another
a
reason.
sign of loyalty. But he
No.
deliberately made people with foreskins. He deliberately made people with foreskins so they could be chopped off.
If you understand the meaning of it, yeah, we are born into this world and something needs to be cut away. The Bible calls it the flesh. I'm not sure if I'm being heard. I'm
Yeah,
not sure if this is coming through.
it's patchy again, but I think I got most of that. Uh, um, yeah.
We are born into the world with something that needs to be cut away. The Bible calls that the flesh. And the Bible says that Jesus performs a circumcision on us without human hands, a circumcision of the heart, where something is cut away, which exposes new sensitivity and new awareness. And I could
Um,
explain more in depth if you'd like, and give you reference.
so Jesus is going to circumcise people's hearts.
That is what the New Testament says. I can give you a quote.
And what
Colossians chapter
exactly is
2,
he going
verse
to cut
11.
off? What exactly is he going to chop off the heart?
Let me no no
I'm
let me
not.
let me let me read the verse and then we can explain it. So in him you are also circumcised with a circumcision not formed by whole self ruled by the flesh was That's
Okay, can you say that
Colossians 2,
again? That
verse
was
11.
really broken up for me. Can you say that
Maybe I
again,
can put it
please?
on
That
the
was really broken up.
screen.
Okay. Actually, just try reading it again, because we need a decent audio connection anyway. What book was it again?
Yeah, Colossians 2, verse 11.
Colossians. Acts.
Self-ruled by the flesh was put off when you were circumcised by
Corinthians.
Christ. This
Colossians.
happened to be Colossians, yeah, 2, verse 11.
Colossians. Oh, wow. I opened straight there. And Jesus, who is called Justus.
Colossians chapter
What the hell?
2, verse
Jesus,
11.
who is called Justus. Yeah.
Where are you reading from?
Oh, hang on. No, I'm on 4. I'm on.
Colossians
Try
chapter
4:11. And Jesus, who is called Justus.
2.
These are my fellow workers for the kingdom, who are of the circumcision. They proved to be a comfort to me. My God.
Yeah, we're definitely having connection
Yeah.
difficulties.
Try
But Colossians
try 4:11. Read to me what your 4:11 says.
11.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're having such a bad connection.
Yeah.
Okay,
Does
I
yours
guess I'll
say
just...
Jesus, who
Oh,
is
okay,
called
so
Justus?
Colossians 4. Yes, there was a man, another man.
4:11.
This isn't a reference.
Jesus, who is called...
Yeah, this isn't a reference to Jesus Christ. This is the name Jesus was a popular Jewish name. In English, it's typically Joshua. So Jesus, who is
Yeah.
called Justus, met Jesus, a companion of Paul's.
Okay.
There's quite a few people named Jesus in the New Testament, other than
So what was it?
Jesus.
So what was it again that Jesus is going to circumcise off the heart?
Right. Colossians 2. Did you read Colossians 2, verse 11?
Yeah, no, but I missed what you said.
I was just
Colossians
reading
2:11.
Colossians 2, verse 11. Do you want me to read it again? It actually tells you what he'll cut away, and then I can show you other places. And this is what happened to me, June 28, 2006. And I could explain that in
2006.
more detail.
Yeah, okay. Tell us what happened to you.
Okay, so do I need to read Colossians 2:11 again, or are we
No,
okay there?
I'll do it whilst you're telling everyone about what happened to
Oh,
you
sure.
in 2006.
Basically, up until then, I was like a lot of people. I was pretty hostile towards anyone who claimed to believe in God. I claimed to be an atheist. Anyone who mentioned religion or whatever, I'd ridicule them and say they were stupid for believing in that stuff. And now, obviously, I'm of a very different mind. Something changed. Something in me was cut away.
But do you not think that that happens to people of all faiths all around the world?
It wasn't merely a change of my attitude towards, believing in God. It was a change of a lot of different things.
But do you not think that that happens to people all over the world of all different faiths?
Not like this, no.
I think that's just de facto wrong. That you talk to Muslims, they will have these miraculous conversions. You get it for Hindus, you get it for Scientologists and Mormons. They all speak of a very similar, I was blind and then I could see type thing. I don't think that what you're describing is unique to Christianity, and certainly,
The language I would use to describe it would be unique. There would be some unique elements, I assure you.
you know, but you've not you think that this was only your experience here was correct, and all of these other people have basically described exactly what you've described. It wasn't the same for them.
It has more to do with what is different now. Um, it doesn't just talk about the circumcision of the flesh, it also talks about the receiving of the Spirit. And so it's a removal of something and an addition received that the Bible describes, which no other religion makes the claim to have or to have experienced.
No, I mean almost all religions. I mean, if you're going to have a change of heart, a change of attitude, it almost by definition means that you're going to get rid of some things and acquire others. I mean, this what you're describing is just a change in attitude.
No, not merely. I'm talking about literally not just a change of nature on the inside, but a real presence enters your life that abides with you. The New Testament describes it as in Jeremiah. It's the promise of the new covenant of the New Testament, which was foretold in the Old Testament in Jeremiah 31, where it says the people's sins would be forgiven, and they would then know God, like in a personal, real way.
But why do you think that this happened to you? I mean, why doesn't
I'm not
this just
special.
happen to
I mean, I'm
everyone?
not. It's because I didn't just happen upon it. It's not like I made a discovery or I did something meritorious that made me better than anyone else. It has nothing to do with me at all.
But I mean, for instance, why do you think that the people who have these sorts of experiences with Christianity essentially happen almost exclusively in Christian countries, whereas people who have these sort of experiences with Islamic religions happens almost exclusively where Islam is basically the atmosphere that they live in? I mean,
Well,
don't
I've
you think
spoken
that
with.
again, the more likely explanation is that you were basically looking for something and you found it? I mean, this is a sort of confirmational bias type thing.
Well, what I'm saying is I had something of a experience, if we want to use that word, where something that was not in me, something external to me, happened. And when I speak with people of different religions, like you mentioned, they do not make similar claims. They would never claim to make. They would never make the claims that I'm making.
They do. I mean, there are conversion stories like this
They would never say to
everywhere.
actually knowing. They would never claim to know God or experience God or to have God's Spirit present or to come into their lives in some meaningful way. I've never heard that claim from
Well,
any
I
of
mean,
them.
for certain, look, I mean, there are people who claim to be Jesus, the second coming, right? And there are people there who, in fact, there was one of these guys down in New Mexico who had one of these sort of end of the world type cults, and his followers describe exactly what you're talking about this miraculous experience, and it was with this one guy. That means that he must be the Son of God, and that he wanted to be one with them so much, and this was just an incredible experience. Um, what you're
Thunderfoot, I don't mean to
describing
interrupt you. I think this would be
is
a good point, just because. Sorry. I would never argue, believe in the Bible or Christianity, or even believe what I'm saying based on my own experience. I would never argue from experience that this is a reason for you. So I don't know if we need to dwell upon it much
mm,
longer. And I do want to begin to wrap up, just because we have been
sure.
talking for a
Yeah,
while. May
yeah,
I say something?
please.
I just wanted to say, I hope we can do this again. I hope this was the first of many.
Yeah, I mean, for me, we'll see what people think about that. I mean, if people want to see more of this, that's fine. If not, we can always chat in private.
Sure.
That's fine. Um, but yeah, it's interesting sort of talking to you. I mean, it's a long time since we last talked.
When
Um,
was that? Do you remember?
uh, so I got pulled into some sort of Skype conversation. You were having some sort of thing with DPI Jones at the time,
How long ago
and
was all this? I remember it. I'm just wondering, was that 4 years? 5?
I've got no idea. I did actually look at my last actual video reply to you, and it was 2011, I think, so that's 3 years ago. So it was before then. Yeah, I think 4 years is about right.
All right. Well, hey, man, it was actually cool to talk to you. I enjoyed it. I hope we can do it again. I hope people like it.
Interesting. See, just out of interest, how old are you now? Seeing
I
as
should ask you the
you
same
see,
thing because I butchered. That was terrible. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I'm 28. How old are you?
yeah. I'm 42. I think I'm
Okay.
42. Yeah, that's right. 72. That makes me 42.
So I guess you're younger than I thought you were. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So how old did you think I was?
Honestly, I had no idea. I really
So
hadn't put much thought to it.
there was some guy who wrote. Some guy got confused between me and another guy who was called Phil Mason. They put it up on the wiki that I was like 50 something or other. And it's like, if I look like this when I'm 50 something, I will be so grateful. But yeah,
Do you want to talk for a few more minutes, or do you want to wrap it up? I mean, I could probably go on for
that's
another. Okay. Um,
okay. It
then
was good talking.
you too.
I hope everyone else enjoyed it. And if there are any real burning questions, we can take a look at those and maybe address them next time.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. So,
Take care.
okay, we're at